Hey everyone, this is Other Side of Hurt podcast. My name is Tristan. I'm joined today by my lovely wife, Jill, and she and I are the directors at Smile Again Grief Ministries here in Minnesota. We work primarily with families who have suffered the loss of a child. And one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is we want to just share stories. We want to kind of get the word out of what we're doing, but also engage with other people who are going through very difficult things, but finding joy and goodness and peace in the middle of it. And so Jill's a little on the self-conscious side, so thanks for being willing to jump in and try this with me today. And like I said, we're doing video as well, and you're at least, you're pretty, so that's good enough. Like you're raising the letter of our video content right now just by being on the screen. But glad you're with us. But I got to start and just say, like, our youngest son, our baby, is 3 months old. His name is Josiah, and he hates me. I've never had a baby who has hated me more than Josiah has. This is not our first go around. He's our seventh kid. I'm decent with babies, but like I cannot get him to settle down. And as you know, last night I was up for like 3 hours with him and he would not sleep. Rough night. And I'm getting a complex. I think he hates me. He loves you, clearly. Like, you touch him and he just like instantly just relaxes and falls asleep. But for me, he just like pushes against me. I don't know if he hates men in general, because he does seem to like women better. He definitely loves you the most, but I'm getting a complex, so I'm a little on edge this morning. So hopefully I'm not too frustrated in our podcast time together. But
well, it's not really fair that the cards are kind of stacked against you from the get-go. Of he likes his food source. So.
He does, but it's not just that. I don't know. It's something. But maybe I'm just a grumpy old man now. Maybe by kid number 7, we're tired. Hey, what we want to talk about today is, we thought this would be an interesting conversation, is talk about our planning of a wedding, right? It's one of the biggest events of your entire life. And we're coming up on 20 years of our anniversary. This spring will be 20 years. And so talking about like that coming together and the joy of marriage and the excitement of the big day, and contrast that with planning a funeral. And there's such, and I was a pastor for 20 plus years. There's such big days, weddings and funerals, and yet there's a beauty in them, and yet a deep hardship in the funeral side. So it's 20 years. So let's just talk about what our wedding was about and leading up to our wedding. So why don't you share a little bit about how we met? Why don't you tell us a little bit of the story there?
Well, it's a fun story. I was in my second year of college at the time, going to a small Bible college in Iowa. And during the beginning of winter semester, I was on a missions team that went to Brazil. And it was just like supposed to be a 10-day missions trip, going to work with a couple of missionaries that were teaching English there at the time. And little did I know how much that trip would change the course of my life. So long story short, Tristan was down there for a 6-month term teaching English with a buddy of his from college. And one of his last responsibilities before he moved back to the States was to host our college's team there for the week. And so, yeah, we met, and I guess you could say, I wanted to say sparks flew, but maybe it wasn't quite as dramatic.
It did for me. Oh, believe me, it did for me. No, see, my perspective is a little bit different, but on my way to Brazil, I did a training in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm from Ohio originally, so I flew from, I think it was Pittsburgh to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and did a training. And I met a pastor at a barbecue during that summer. And 6 months into my time at Brazil, he had emailed me and asked me if I would come up for the next summer to Minnesota. And so I'm like, sure, why not? I was starting seminary, starting to do my master's degree. after I got back from Brazil, but I said, why not spend the summer in Minnesota? Why, I was kind of young and trying to figure out my life. And so I was on my way to Minnesota. And then for 6 months, I'm in Brazil with my buddy Jeremy. And that was a great season, but man, was it lonely and hard. And when you live overseas, I was teaching English. I talk really fast by nature. But in teaching English, I would just speak so methodically, so slowly, just so that people could understand, and you're teaching English. And my last responsibility was this college team from Iowa that was coming, and I meet this girl, and I think I started just using all of my slang. Like, I was like, hey, man, how's it going? Like, running all my words together, because I couldn't do that for, the Brazilians that I was working with. And I think some of the people thought I was from California because I just used all these
like
weird.
A surfer,
yeah, I know.
like,
it was just like
dude.
I had all these words that I hadn't used in 6 months. But I met you and you said you were from Minnesota, and I said, oh, I'm going to be in Minnesota. And just really early on, like I got back from Brazil like 10 days later, and I told my family, I said, I just met the woman I'm going to marry, and I just knew it was going to happen. And so moved up here to Minnesota and been here most of our married life since. Yep. And it was a fairly, like, we dated for, we were the spring semester, we were from at a distance. You were in Iowa. I was in Kentucky at seminary. And then moved up here for the summer. And by the fall, I knew it was like, we're going to get married. So, and we're pretty traditional. So I did ask your dad for permission, for you to marry me. And it was, you had college, you were doing your nursing degree, and you were staying at home that semester. That was the fall semester. And, you wouldn't leave because I was just like, I need to talk to Gordy and I need to ask permission because I've already bought the ring and I want to get engaged, but I was so nervous. That's a big moment in a guy's life, and you wouldn't leave. And, Jill's parents were dairy farmers. So he went out to milk cows and you went off to class. And I was just like, I missed my chance. And we were going to meet up later that night. And, but then your younger sister had to go out and do chores. And she said, Tristan, you want to come help me? And I'm like, not really, but yes, because maybe I can run into Gordy. And I did. Sure enough, in the middle of the milking barn with all the cows, like lining us up, like standing by a bunch of cows. And I said, hey, Gordy, would it be okay? I was so nervous. Would it be okay if, I love your daughter a lot. I think it'd be good for us to get married. Can I have your permission? And he's like, yeah, that'd be okay. And I'm like, that's all you got? Like, that would be okay? It was so awkward.
Now, you have to know my father, super solid guy. But my husband is a man of many words. My father is a man of few words.
Very true.
And so he communicated what he needed to communicate.
Yeah. So. He's like, yeah, good enough. That's fine. You'll do. No, it was good. And he's a great guy. So there we go. And the next, was about a week later or something, I popped the question. And so then we started planning a wedding, and it's something I never really thought much about before. It's like, what do you plan for a wedding? And my assumption was you had the plan all together, right? Like you had I just figured you would have it all figured out.
So, the stereotype is a little girl starts planning her wedding from very early on, or at least that used to be like the idea of, you play dress up and you play wedding. And, I did some of that as a little girl. But I think I always, like, I tend to have I hedge my bets a lot of the time. So I'm afraid to make a confident, like, yes, I'm going to get married someday. Or this is definitely the person that I'm going to marry. I was always a little bit more cautious I didn't want to make a claim and then be disappointed later on that it didn't happen the way that I thought it would. So I spent very little time thinking about what I would want my wedding to be. And so when we started talking about it, I was like, I have, vague memories of weddings I've been to. So I have like some idea of the structure, but I hadn't really thought through, I want this to be a part of it. And I definitely want these people.
So you were hedging your bets with me? Is that what you're saying?
Well, let's just say I didn't come home from Brazil telling my family that
Right.
I met the man I was going to marry.
Fair enough.
I may have thought it, but I just didn't vocalize.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lonely and depressed by that time, so I was just like ready to make a commitment, but yeah, fair enough. And you probably had way more options than I did, so you had to be really cautious, with the. No, okay, so like then, so we didn't really you didn't really have a plan, so.
Right.
I can't remember exactly how this happened. Like we sit down because we started thinking about like, what do you do for a wedding? Mm-hmm. And I mean, do you remember like what that was?
So I don't remember the exact conversation, but you're very good about being able to see overarching themes and to see the big picture of things. I get very stuck in the details of things. So I might get tunnel visioned on, the colors or the music or things like that.
Sure.
And so it was helpful for me to have this conversation with you of, well, what decisions or what do we use as guidelines, I guess, for the decisions we make regarding our wedding? And we settled on 3 different things. So we wanted our wedding to be simple. We didn't want it to be overly extravagant. We didn't want our finances to be stressed.
In other words, I'm like incredibly cheap and poor, and but we're both kind of small town frugal people.
You married a farm girl who's easy to please.
Man,
so
best decision I ever made was marry a small town Minnesota farm girl. But yeah, no, we did, and we I guess neither of us are overly extravagant, and so. And I think we had seen friends and other people that do these just huge, opulent, beautiful weddings. But it's like, is that really, the important thing for us? Is that something we value? So you're right. Simple. Like we wanted it to be simple. Good.
But along with that, we wanted it to be meaningful. So we didn't want it to be simple in the superficial level of things. We wanted there to be depth and meaning to what we did as a part of our ceremony. So choosing the people that have walked with us in a deep way in life, family and friends that we wanted to be part of witnessing this ceremony. And then also, the lyrics of our songs.
And we sang together in our wedding, which I think, I don't know, I think I pushed for that maybe a little bit because I don't think
it was too hard to convince me, but which that's one I didn't love the lyrics of the verses as far as like the depth of it, and yet the chorus of the song proved to be pretty providential for us. True. So the chorus of the song was basically, come what may, I will love you.
Yeah, it's a little romantic, right? I mean, it's a little overly romantic
and
a little, definitely sappy. But yeah, I mean, like the meaning was, come what may, we're gonna love each other. We're gonna stick this out, and it's a beautiful song at many levels. And I mean, you should be a little sappy at a wedding, right? Like you should say grandiose things, maybe, and. You're committing to the rest of your life, and who can do that, right? Who can commit to the rest of their life? So you got to forgive my romantic sappiness or something like that. But so simple, meaningful.
Right. And then we wanted to enjoy our wedding day. We wanted to be able to have fun. So again, some of that comes with making decisions to where we weren't completely exhausted by the time we got to our wedding day. So
I was fine. Did you fulfill that? Because you and your mom and your aunt and a number of other volunteers, you made all of like the main course food for the wedding. So like, again, the simple small town farm life, but you guys put a ton of work in, right?
We did. It was a little exhausting the day before that we got married. Just in, doing food preparations pretty much from after we finished breakfast until it was time to change and go to the rehearsal. But in everything in life, you kind of have trade-offs, right? So you trade the, not having some of the potential financial strain for then a bigger time commitment. And, we could have done it the other way around. And who knows what the perfect balance of that is.
A couple hundred people at least at our wedding, right? I mean, probably over 200. And
Yep.
so you cook for 200 people, like
Yep.
the days leading up to your wedding. Like
Yep.
that's how awesome you are. That's
Well, and at the time it was a little bit, by the end of the day, I was a little bit frazzled because it was a quick turnaround to going to the rehearsal. And then that, is just the start of the build up to the big activities.
Oh, and your car broke down like that week, the week of the wedding.
Yeah.
Your car broke down somewhere between here. I live about an hour from your parents at the time, and somewhere in the family thing, like you got, and it was the week of the wedding. I remember because you got stuck,
and your family had already
and my
gotten
family
there.
we had to go come pick you up or whatever or something. So yeah.
So it wasn't
man.
all smooth sailing,
No.
despite all of our planning for that.
What-
But yeah, I even at the time maybe being frazzled, but it's fun to be able to, in hindsight, look back and like there is something to remembering all the people that came alongside us and helped in that time. So we were talking about the food preparations, but just remembering my mom and my aunts and my cousins and my sister, like all just filtering through, chopping stuff or rolling out dough or cooking bacon and things like that. So it's a memory now I can smile at when I think back at it. So
what would you do differently? Anything you'd do differently?
I don't know. I mean, maybe investing a little bit more in like catering, or maybe our wedding pictures were okay. We kind of
paid a little bit
saved
more for
maybe a little bit too much on that.
Fair.
So having those better quality pictures for photo books, but who has time in this season to sit and look at photo books right now anyway? So
I think spending a little bit more money, and because like at the end of the day, but I think other than that, like it's not major regret, and it was good. Anything else on preparing a wedding, planning a wedding, getting all the details in place? Anything else stick out to you? I think one of the things we talked about is like the wedding's a day. It's a big day. It's an important day, but marriage is life, and the main thing is being ready for marriage and entering into this beautiful life together, which is the main part of marriage, right? I mean, like that's the thing. And so the wedding was good. It was a good day of preparation. Well, let's shift, and so part of our story is we lost a daughter. Our daughter Maria was almost 4 years old. She died in 2016, so completely unexpected. She didn't have any chronic illnesses. She didn't have any anything that we had no idea that she was going to die, and she died very suddenly. And we don't need to go into too many details on her death, but one of the things was that all of a sudden having to plan a memorial service, a funeral for your daughter. And at the same time, you were 9 months pregnant with our daughter, Lucy, at the time. And so we had this really bizarre situation where we really wanted to plan Maria's funeral, but we didn't know when you were going to give birth. And it was that was so complicated.
Well, I remember we were both in shock, and like having those thoughts of how do you go about planning a funeral for your daughter? It's not something that you ever think through ahead of time, or, and I remember just paralyzed in a lot of ways to make those decisions. So the day that we were scheduled to do visitation for our daughters and then have the funeral the following day, in the wee morning hours, my water broke. And so instead of doing my daughter's visitation, I went to go give birth to our fifth daughter. I know you've talked about many times, like just how surreal and awful it was that normally when you have a baby, you're so excited to make those phone calls of like, she's here and, everybody's doing well. But just having that like very first phone call to be to our funeral director.
Yeah.
And just yeah, how do you plan for memorializing your one daughter while like embracing the life and joy of a new one?
That's something I didn't even think about, but like, yeah, we were when we think about this idea of planning, talking about planning a wedding, but we were planning our fifth daughter, her birth, like,
Yeah.
and you prepare for that. And we were so close. And of course, in all of the preparation, there's no concept that between now and the birth of this child, your life is going to be utterly and completely devastated. And so just all of the plans around Lucy's birth that we were excited about just became so overshadowed with sorrow. And yeah, I think calling the funeral director is maybe a metaphor or something. Like I talk about that a lot because it is just so bizarre, and it wasn't anything bad. We've got a great funeral director. He's fantastic, but just you're on the way to the hospital to have this child, and that's who you call. That's who you think to call, because we were literally going to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people showing up that night for visitation for Maria's funeral and the funeral the next day. And all of that got put on hold. Part of this was in our town, we didn't have a building big enough to host Maria's funeral, except for the local high school. And so the local high school was on spring break, and they were so helpful. They set everything up for the visitation. And then that was right at the end of spring break. They had to tear everything down, put everything away, do school again, then reset it all up the next week. Like what was it, about 4 days later, I think, for Maria's funeral. But yeah, that idea of planning all of these things, planning Lucy's birth, and how that just got so upended.
Yeah. And I remember, again, just kind of being somewhat paralyzed in like how I don't even know where to start in this process. And I was so thankful for you at the time. With Tristan being a pastor, he'd been a part of many people's funerals, and had walked with many people in that process of planning. And I remember it being, for him, kind of that, like, this is something I can do for my daughter. This is like a great act of love that I can give her. And so he spent a lot of time, and it was something you could do. It was something that you could focus on.
I was nervous. Sorry to interrupt. I was nervous. I was like, he gave me a mission. It's like I put all of my time into the funeral and like making a video of her and, just trying to do everything. I didn't sleep much, and that's what my sole focus became, of like trying to figure out all the details and like what needs to be said. And and it was just like, that's all I could focus in on was trying to do this. And it was like, it really distracted me from Lucy's birth. Like it was like, that became like such a secondary thing, or an unimportant thing. I hate to say that. Lucy's great. We love her. But at the time, she's just this unknown baby that's coming into the world. But that became my mission in so many ways, was to plan out the Maria's funeral.
Yeah. Which is good, because for me, so much of my sole focus became caring for Lucy, this newborn that was dependent upon me for life at that time. And
I think you were grateful to have Lucy at the funeral, because she was like your safety blanket. So
she was.
You weren't sure how to interact with people, and it's so brutal and so hard to know how to interact. But you were able just to like snuggle the baby and kind of hide away as best you can.
And there's awkward moments in conversation. We could all pause and look at the cute baby that I had with me. But I wasn't completely removed from all the decisions that were made. But I did lean heavily on you, and then I trusted that you would pick something that would honor both our daughter and honor those that we loved that were walking with us at the time, and would honor God in this.
Yeah. I will say this. I overplanned.
It was not a simple service
No.
like we tried to plan for in our wedding.
It's hard to find humor in things like this, but the reality is like I'm just this broken down, so sad, so broken that I'm like, we are going to say everything and do everything and keep everyone in this gymnasium way too long. And so like I put this video together of her life, and that was maybe, I don't know, 15 to 17. It was long. And then after that I had like a bunch of friends, and God bless all of them. I shouldn't have asked all of them. It was just too many people to share. And then I got up and shared, and it was just like, it was just too much. And we had great musicians and a sweet, like the music was fantastic. The music was powerful. But it was just too much. It was too much. I mean, the service was like, gosh, an hour and 40 minutes long. I mean, just like, it was so long. I feel bad, but I mean, like, I don't know. I guess.
But do you regret it for yourself?
I think I would say that in hindsight, it's easy to be like, whoa, that was too much, and I should have scaled it way back. But I mean, you've got to be like, if I look at myself as an outsider, it's like, this guy is so broken down and he just has to get it all out, or just, and so, yeah, there's a lot of grace there. I don't like, it's no major regrets, but it was so long.
It was.
And it was long. And, but so be it. It is what it is. And, but I mean, and I shared a couple of times at the memorial, and,
well, it's hard to even know like what to, because part of our thing too is we have so many great people in our lives, and have had that. So even those that, was a large number of those we asked to be a part of it, but it's also like, a friend who was walking with us so closely in that time. Someone who started out as a coworker and then became closer than a brother to you. And the pastor that baptized Maria, and then buried her.
Yeah.
Even those that were a part of the music, just deep friends.
Yeah. I had the service concluded with "It Is Well With My Soul," and Phil, who helped with the funeral, and then he actually did the burial at the grave. They sang, I think, a verse or two of it a cappella, and I heard a pastor say it was like one of the most powerful moments of his life, which is a hymn that still is hauntingly beautiful and difficult and special. I mean, like every song from the funeral, it just like, it's hard to sing it without choking up, but I can sing them again. Like it took me, it took us all several years till we could sing those, but they were powerful. And, and I guess maybe you're right. I don't really have regrets. It was okay. Let's talk, one thing I didn't plan, and it was the graveside. So we had probably, I don't know, there's probably 700-800 people at Maria's funeral. For the long funeral. But then we went to bury her. And we just did family for that. Like it was only just immediate family. There's probably, I don't know, 25 of us or so out there. And, I just asked Phil, who is the one who, he's the one who baptized Maria, and I just said, Phil, you just do whatever you feel like you need to do. And we drove like the 2 miles out there, which was just terrible, with our family, and we're heading out to the grave, and we had the song by is it Fernando Ortega, just on repeat. It is "Give Me Jesus." And there's another song that just like, that was like the one song I'm like, that I could relate to, and we could relate to, and we just had that on repeat. And we get out to the grave, and baby Lucy just starts screaming and screaming. And it's like, what do? We got a crying baby. And so there we sit, and you just said like, well, just go and do this. Just go and just finish it up. And I'm like, no, no, we're all going to wait. And so you had to nurse the baby. And so everybody just kind of hanging out at the grave. And while you nursed. And so there we had that pause, and you nursed the baby, and we managed the other kids, and the family was out there. And then Phil, I'm super grateful to Phil to this day for that little time there. You want to talk about it, or should
Go ahead.
you want me to? I'm a man of many words. Like you're like, are you really interviewing me right now, Tristan? That's let's.
I actually think I was still in the car at the time, and so feeding Lucy.
When we started?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
What? Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't there?
Because you told me about it afterwards.
Oh man,
Yeah.
It's so weird how our memory does that.
Yeah.
Because I think we all wanted you to be out there, but maybe, yeah. So you weren't even. Oh, geez. Can we edit this part out of the? Oh man, it's weird how your memory plays tricks. But yeah, okay. So what Phil did? I mean, he didn't say much. He said a couple words, and the very last video we have of Maria was recorded 1 week before she died. She was we had a babysitter over, a dear friend of ours who loves our girls, and she had all four of our girls at the time sing "Jesus Loves Me," and that was like the final video on the video that we showed at the funeral. Mm-hmm. And so Phil, just like in a very sweet way, just said, "Let's." He shared a couple thoughts, maybe a scripture or two. And he said, well, we're going to conclude, and let's just all sing Jesus Loves Me, which I got to admit, I hate that song. I never really, it's so childish maybe. And it's just, there's something I've just never really liked it. But in that moment, it became just sacred. And so there we are, like 25 family members roughly, and we sing it. And that just became, so that becomes a thing every March 4th, every May 3rd, the day that Maria died and her birthday, when we go out as a family, like we try to muddle through that stupid song. And yet, it's been a good ritual for us. Mm-hmm. And that was like, you're talking about planning. There are those moments that are just like not planned, and that become sacred. They become.
And that simple little song carries so much depth and meaning to us because of how it's been used. So with Maria, it's one of our last recorded videos was her singing this song. And then the Graveside, and continued use of that song when we go out to visit the grave, because it was a way, our other kids were pretty young at the time, and it was a way that we could engage them while we were out there. Yeah. Although I think it became hard for all of us to sing that song. Yeah. But also the church that we were at the time that Tristan was pastoring, a few years prior to that, had started this super sweet tradition where anytime that it would be a new baby's first Sunday at church, they would invite the parents and family up with the little baby, and the entire congregation would sing Jesus Loves You to this new little baby. And it's a tradition that they've maintained to this day. Yeah.
Was that started before
it
Maria
was?
Died? Okay.
Yeah, because
see, you remember things. I don't remember. I just make stuff up. But okay, so it was started before that.
With Lucy, I figured she would be our first baby that they would sing Jesus Loves You to. But I don't think we ever did, because we were in such a broken state, and it took a few weeks to start attending church again and to feel comfortable kind of being in the public eye again after Maria's loss.
We hung out in the balcony.
I was going to say, and then for a few weeks after that, we kind of snuck in just as church was starting, sat up in the balcony, and then made a pretty quick exit, just because we weren't ready for a lot of conversations at the time. Yeah. And so I think that Elijah was our first baby that the church sang that to.
Yeah. But with all the babies born since Maria died, every time that happened in church, I would tear up, you know. It's just yeah, it's weird how a song you don't even care about like has all this deep meaning now of welcoming all these children, which is a beautiful thing. Like anytime a baby's like born into the life of the church, it's a great thing. And but man, that just, it always takes me back to the grave and to that moment. But yeah, it's anything you would do differently when we were planning the funeral, the graveside,
I think if anything, it probably would have been making everybody wait in between the funeral and the graveside so that I could just pause, feed Lucy.
Oh yeah.
And then be able to just be there and be present. Yeah. But again, there's a lot of things that you just can't anticipate or fully plan for. But yeah, I mean, the readings and everything were very impactful and meaningful. And again, just having all those important people standing with us and being a part of things was important.
I know one thing I would do. I would have spelled memoriam correctly. On our worship, so on the worship bulletin, which I put together, and our church secretary like finished it off and everything. We titled it In Memoriam and something with Maria or whatever. And but I spelled it wrong. But nobody probably knows because it's Latin, right? It is Latin, I think. But I think it was like OM at the end instead of UM or something, whatever it was wrong. And I noticed this after the fact, but you'd have already printed like 1,000 copies of this thing. So there you go. The one of the most impactful days of my life, and I made a giant spelling error on the title of it. So I think we still have those probably laying in a box somewhere, and they're all misspelled, but
hey, if that's the worst of your regrets, I guess that's not
well,
so
that
bad.
And like, I think in hindsight, condensing it all down a bit, but who cares? You do the best you can. And maybe that's kind of the point of this podcast is you plan the best you can for your wedding, for the worst days like funerals, but you can't ever make it all perfect. You can't make it all meaningful. You offer the best you can, and it has whatever impact it has based on God's grace and God's mercy. And but it's hard. It's the planning these things are incredibly difficult, but God's been, there's so many things. It is weird back. We look back, and I look back on the funeral, and it makes me cry and it makes me laugh. Like I think this is actually in what I said at the funeral. This is actually kind of funny. I'm there, my daughter just died. I'm devastated, but there was a funny part, and part of it was Maria was very social, and she would just go out and like hang out with anybody. And like a month before she died at Riverview, I was looking around during like the singing and worship service, and I didn't see her anywhere. And there was this guy who looked like a homeless guy who was pretty new to our community. I think he'd been on drugs and had a number of issues, and was a pretty rough, broken down fellow. Had just started coming to our church, and our church was big enough to where, lots of people would come and go. And so you didn't really know everybody. And I looked over in the middle of, the singing, and Maria's sitting by this guy, like this scary looking stranger, and like this 3 3/4 year old just wandered over and just hanging out, and he's like talking to her, and I'm like, I don't know that this is good. And but Maria's just like, she's friends with everybody, and she would just go out and welcome people, and I'm including like this scary looking homeless guy. And so I tell this story in her funeral. And then I'm like, and if you're the scary looking homeless guy, like, sorry, like sorry if you're attending here. That's maybe a little awkward for you, but sorry, you kind of freaked me out. So, there are funny and joyful moments even in the midst of the worst things in the world. And that's like what we want to keep talking about in this podcast is there's still beauty, there's still goodness, there's still joy in the midst of the worst suffering. And even, you look back on the funeral and you're like, it was terrible. And yet there were some good things that happened.
And I think that's been a theme through much of our life, but especially in the loss of our daughter and life sense, is to not deny the reality that this world is hard sometimes. But in facing the suffering, to also recognize and point to hope and beauty in the midst of that. And I think that was a big thing that we wanted to communicate in the service and in talks and writings and things like that sense, is that there is darkness, but there's also a light that pierces that darkness.
Yeah. And I want to and you should weep about this stuff, right? You should suffer. You're going to suffer greatly. Man, I'm a little too much on that side of things, but then just say but there's still good, and God's called us this life, and even our ministry at Smile Again, that's what we want so much of it to be about. It's don't just put a smile on your face and be okay. This podcast is going to be terrible. That's my goal. It's going to be so awful that everybody that listens to it will feel terrible for listening to it, and then hopefully chuckle a little bit along the way, or find some joy in it, because you want to embrace the reality of the suffering, the hardest things. But there's still goodness, there's still beauty, there's still joy. So, hey, this has been fun. Yeah. Thanks for doing this and coming on. And this is fun. Come what may.
Fun to cry together and to laugh together and tell.
And you're pretty, so there you go. You're pretty, and so there's that. So. Hey, everybody, thanks for making it all the way to the end of our podcast. Please share and like and subscribe to be a part of the Other Side of Hurt community. Also, if you are somebody who has recently suffered the loss of a child, or if you know of a family, we are going to link to our website, Smile Again Grief Ministries, below. And we would love to connect with you to see if there's anything we can do as we walk together in some of the most difficult things that families go through. God bless you.